So we're going to get into patron registration. There are some things that a person needs to get an Evergreen, Indiana Library account. They generally need a valid ID, whether that's an Indiana driver's license or a state ID, or it could be a current government issued photo ID, an example like a passport or something like that. And then also proof of residency. Those may be the same thing if it is a Indiana driver's license that has their correct address on it, or could be documentation for this current school year, whether it's a class schedule or report card or something. You can see those types of things in here. So this states here that it needs to be a valid Indiana driver's license or state ID. There are some exceptions in here. Well, exceptions, yes and no. Say somebody moves into your service area and they come with an Arkansas driver's license. Obviously, it doesn't have their correct address on it. But if they come with that valid ID and then they come with proof of residency, so could be a utility bill or something like that, could be a lease, then they should be eligible for an Evergreen, Indiana Library card. There are a variety of patron profiles that we can choose. So somebody comes in to your library, and as you are registering them for this account, some determinations need to be made on what type of profile they are assigned as they get this card. So if they are going to get full consortium service, which means they can borrow anything from your library, they can place things on hold from other Evergreen Indiana libraries, they can go to another Evergreen Indiana library and borrow there in person, they can return things at any Evergreen Indiana library, that being full consortium service. They will need to have a resident card, which means that they reside within your service area. A non-resident card, which is a paid card, and that's based on your library's non-resident fee that's established by your board. An outreach card, and this is something that you determine how you'll use that outreach card. Generally, it has something to do, could be a classroom card or something like that, or it could be, just as it says, outreach. Someone with a plaque card, meaning that they have an established home library card, and then they've purchased a plaque card, which is a public library access card, that will give them access to the full consortium benefits as well. I believe that the fee for that this year is still $65. A staff card, this is an optional benefit that a library may extend to those individuals who are employed by it, and that's to be determined by the board. A staff card is a card type that does not accrue fines for overdue, and so sometimes that's meaningful if your library still assesses fines for overdues for patrons. In fine-free libraries, it's less of a benefit anymore. And then there's also a temp card. And then there are individuals who are local service only individuals. They will receive a blue card. And so you'll hear mentioned the green card and the blue card. The blue card is for local service only. Reciprocal borrowers, those people with which your library has a covenant or an agreement with their library district, they can come and get a reciprocal borrower card from your library. Also, students who live outside of your service area, as well as teachers, may get a card as well. And then transitional cards. A transitional card needs to be sponsored by someone in your library system. It could be an organization or a business, or it may actually be somebody on staff, but it's somebody who takes on the responsibility for somebody who may not have a permanent address, may not have documentation yet to establish them as a resident or anything else. And so there is that. And then you can see a couple notes down here. Limited access can actually apply to any of these patron profiles, and it restricts access to items that carry a rating. And then computer usage card is something that provides access only to the digital resources of a library. There are some libraries that use that pretty heavily and others that don't use it at all. So that will be determined by your local policies and workflows. Okay, to register a patron, once you have established which patron profile you're going to use for that patron, you can click on the link in the circulation and patrons category, or you can select register patron from the circulation menu. As we get into the registration interface, just some things to remember: to use the United States Postal Service abbreviations, and don't insert punctuation into the address lines. Another thing is to keep in mind to collect as much information as is reasonable to distinguish each patron from another. Keep in mind we have 125-ish libraries right now, and more coming online in the future. And each of those libraries has potentially thousands of individuals that are in there, some with duplicate names and some with other things. So we need to establish each of those individuals as unique individuals, and so gathering enough information about them to do that. Another important thing, and this is not something that I'm going to get too adamant about, but in my head I'm super adamant about it, are patron birth dates. This is one of those things, as we look at their names, and the names in most cases, and we know some pretty obvious ones, don't generally change except for maybe marriage or divorce or something like that. But those are generally a good match point if we think about matching a person with their record. And a person's birth date does not change. And so that is some information about them that is generally reliable. And so collecting their birth date is, in my mind, a very important thing. This is something that actually I came up against and was a point of contention at one point on staff at one of my libraries, because one of my staff people thought that it was rude to document birth dates. And I get that. And yet it is, of course, private information in there, and it's a way for us to establish a person as a unique individual within the system. In this presentation, the presentation materials, there is a live link to the United States Postal Service's abbreviations website. I will tell you it is quite large and easy to get lost in. So when clicking on the link for Register Patron, you're going to come to this form. You can see that there are some fields that are highlighted as yellow, and those are required fields. You'll see my field that I just said, we must do this thing, but not really. Date of birth is as highlighted as yellow. Something does need to be in that field. Hopefully it's the accurate birth date, but it hasn't always been. You also have some options up at the top. And we'll look at those. You can see that it says show required fields, show suggested fields, and then next to that with some lighter gray text it says all fields. We have selected all fields right now, so if I were to select required fields, then that would be gray. I like to have all fields open because, again, I'd like to gather as much information as possible to establish this individual as a unique person in the system. Then further down, beyond the barcode, OPAC, and password fields, there is the primary name and the preferred name. As we go through, we'll see how that comes into play as we are registering our patrons. Then we also have to select a profile group, and those are those profiles that we looked at, whether they be green cards or blue cards, having full consortial access or local only. And then the internet access level. This is generally, the choices are filtered and unfiltered. That's not really going to change a whole lot in your library unless you have specifically assigned different access levels, perhaps based on age and things like that. Some libraries do have, like the children's room, that is a filtered internet access, whereas the general public computers have less filtering on them or even no filtering on them, and so that may be determined in there. And then as we go down, we see options for phone number, as well as if there are text notifications. There are some things to consider as we're entering the information in those fields, but I think that we're going to talk about those later. And then as we get into the address fields, it is important to keep in mind when we are considering addresses that we use the physical address to determine residency requirements for providing service, and then we use the mailing address for the mailing of stuff. They may be the same, but they may not, especially, or most notably in my mind right now, rural locations that use post office boxes or things like that, which would be the mailing address, but there's not enough information in that to establish the residency. There is the potential in some cases for people to not know their physical address. They may know what street they live on or how to get there, but then they have an established post office box that goes along with that. And so they may need to do some more research on that. Less so with individuals who own a property because they had to go through establishing what actual property they own. But in the case of people who may be renting or living with someone else even, there may need to be some more research for that. And then down at the bottom, there are the statistical categories that you may or may not, depending on your library, have to select from. The two that are listed there, the education card type, this is something that applies if you're issuing a student card or a teacher card. You're just going to say, is it a student card or a teacher card? And then if you are registering a plaque card for an individual, you're going to select their home library from that drop down there for plaque home library in the statistical categories. Another thing about the addresses, going back up here a little bit, you can see that there is one address field there, and in this case it has both mailing and physical address ticked, and so that's going to function as both of those things. But if I needed to establish separate mailing and physical addresses, I could just click on new address, and that would provide another set of fields to fill in with that other address, and then tick the appropriate box. Any questions about patron registration right now? We're not quite done with that. We're going to get into another aspect of it, but there is also, and I was going to say, I can't believe I didn't do this, but I can 100% believe I didn't do it. There is the Evergreen, Indiana Patron Matrix, and it gives you more information about those profile types. And I will make sure to, I'm going to put this in chat for my own benefit, but also for yours if you are interested in looking at that right now. This is just a one-page thing, and this is something that you could also print out and have available for easy reference by your circulation staff or your own self to see those, the differentiations between them. And you can see that local access means access is limited to that Evergreen, Indiana library that's issued the card. So say, for instance, you are at Centerville Library and you are issuing a junior card, which was not on that list. That's a new card type as of 3 months ago or 4 months ago. That person with that card would only have access to the things available through that Centerville library, not any other Evergreen, Indiana libraries. Okay, I'm gonna pop back over here. We'll keep going. We are going to go through pending patrons, and then we are going to take just a short break and come back after that. Pending patrons, what this does is it allows community members, anybody that has access to the internet and the public catalog through it, to request a library card. And they initiate that process by clicking that link down at the lower left-hand side of the catalog, request library card, and that's going to take them to this screen where they can request a library card. And so they will fill out the required fields. They can select the home library. The link that is there, and I'm going to actually go to our website, OPAC, maybe if I can just type. So we're going to click on this. Oh no. Well, in practice, when that's fixed, they can click on the which library do I use, and it should bring them to the map. They can put their address into the search bar, and I'm going to put an old address of mine in here. I do no longer live there, so. And then if I click on that, I can see which library I would go to establish an account. But then in the home library, I could then select it from that drop down. So this is going to, they're going to fill out all the required fields, maybe a little bit more than that. It's going to then take them to the further instruction page where it says to visit the library within 7 days. Bring this stuff along with you in order to prove your identity and your residency. And then you can return to the they can return to the catalog. Now, what happens with that is now on the staff side, in the staff interface, there's continued work to be done to create an account for this patron. So you'll click on the pending patrons, and that's going to take you to the pending patrons screen. You can see here that there is the home library that if you click in that, will provide a drop down of all of the library locations in Evergreen, Indiana, but you're generally only going to want to look at those things within your library system. And this will be scoped based on where you as an individual have been given permission to work in your library system. If you are a one location only library, you're going to have one option. If you are a multi-branch system, you may just have one branch, or you may have all of the branch locations in your system. Again, that's a local decision for you. Now, clicking only one patron at a time. So you're not going to be doing any bulk actions with this. If you select more than one, only one new tab will open, and it will be with the first listed patron that you selected. I'm going to pop back here real quick. You select it, it's going to enable the button Load Patron, which is then going to take you to the Register Patron interface, but it's going to have all that information that they supplied already populated in there, and then you'll just have to go in and fill in the other required fields. In this case, just the barcode. Now, as long as the OPAC staff client username, as long as that is empty, when you put your barcode in the top field and then tab into that next field, it's going to automatically populate it with the barcode. And that is good. Now, a patron can update that to something else through the My Account feature, or you could if they were there with you as well. But by automatically populating it saves a little bit of a step. there's a comment that it would be nice if phone numbers were also a required field. Yes, except for not all of our patrons have phone numbers. And so there definitely has to be a way to, well, there doesn't, because there doesn't need to be a way for us to contact them prior to their account being required, because they may never come in, and the onus of action is upon them to show up with their stuff. And so if you find that somebody has not shown up, you can also delete them from the pending patrons. There isn't an obligation to continue with that registration process, because you're also going to be evaluating whether or not they already have a library card in Evergreen, Indiana, an account some way. And so we need to look at those match points they provided. Or if the service area that they selected is correct. I mean, it may not even be, they may not even be a candidate for a library account in your library as well. But yeah, there are times when you like to say, I want you to fill this out and this out. And we try to keep it as descriptive as possible, require as much description as possible, but still leave it as open as we need to, so that it applies in those ways.